because of constructor deadlocks. Because of constructor deadlocks. And if I get this answer from any developer in the world, that means I can know that, okay, he's good, genius in programming. He's good in programming. He's expert in programming. If he says ambiguity problem and all that nonsense, why? Because so that means I can expect his experience levels and I can expect his skills in programming that without knowing he's using it from several years now. Right? He's still using it without knowing about it technically. So what is this constructor deadlocks? What is this point? Because we need to prove every concept that we talk about, right? So technically, what happens here is whenever we are using inheritance, whenever we are using the inheritance concept. So that means we have class A. And class A will have a constructor. Every class will have a constructor. Class B, we know that already by default a constructor is present. Class B is also having a constructor. According to the rules, so here you can see A class. This A class is extended. B is extends A class. So B is extending A class. When B is extending A class and you are creating an object for B, we are creating an object for B class. First, what happens is, as per the extensibility rules, first base class constructor will be called. This is a super class constructor will be called. After that, the constructor of derived class will be called. So that means always first the base class constructor will be called. After that, super class constructor will be called. That is the inheritance rule. So let me explain this point. So note, actually, in inheritance implementation, when you create an object for derived class, first the constructor of super class is called, then followed by derived class constructor. That means in inheritance implementation, when you create an object for derived class, first the constructor of super class is called, then followed by derived class. It's always the same point. That means first the super class constructor is called, then followed by derived class constructor. So without calling the super class constructor, the derived class constructor cannot be called. This is very important. You can observe this point. See, you can observe this point here. Uh, Later, I will give you an example. Suppose we have class as super. This is super class. Okay. And we have a class called derived class. Okay. And derived class, super class is having a constructor. And this constructor have a statement console.log. This is super class constructor. Okay. Now, another important is this derived class is also having a constructor. Up to this moment, no problem. Console.log. So derived class constructor. Up to this point, no problem, because they don't have relation yet. I will create an object for derived class. Let obj is equal to new derived class. Right? So it is an object for new derived class object. Okay. Now important is there is no relationship between them. Let's create a relationship. That means derived class extends the base class. Base class is super class. It extends the super class. It is extending the super class. Now you see we have a problem in constructor of derived class. What is the problem in the constructor of derived class? It says that constructors of derived class must contain a super call. This point you need to remember. Constructors of a derived class must contain a super call. Actually, you are not experiencing this in your general object-oriented programming. So that's the reason you are not aware of that. Constructors of derived class must contain a super call actually. Implicitly they are done. Explicitly they should contain it. That means here inside this constructor, suppose I am using the keyword super. That means I am calling the super class constructor here. Now the problem is solved. That means we are defining the super class constructor here. Now I am writing this super. I am writing this super after this statement. So you are writing that after the statement. Anywhere you write, no problem. Here the point is when you compile and run this. So let's compile and run this. So when I compile and run this, so you can see it says derived class constructor and super class constructor. Printing, how you are printing, it doesn't matter, right? You can print this line first, this line second. But here concept is not printing this line. The concept is without calling the superclass constructor first, you cannot call the derived class constructor. That is the rule. Where it is printing, it doesn't matter because many people are concerned about this. That means, sir, if I print after this, will it print? Then you are saying it is calling superclass constructor, right? Of course, it is calling first superclass constructor only. But in the output, you have given first priority for the first line. Superclass constructor is called, but it is waiting to execute. That means whenever you create a derived class object, first superclass constructor only called, then followed by derived class constructor, right? That means now for your to cleanly understand, if I remove that, then you will see a problem. It is saying that without super call, we cannot access it. That means superclass constructor must be there.